Okay, the question of the day is, why do we go to work?
Make money.
Why do we go to work?
Because Ginny doesn't want me around the house all day.
Because Jenny does his run around the house. All right. I won't elaborate. Notice which side of the ledger I put that on, John. There's a number of worldly reasons why we go to work. Wealth, prestige, esteem, purpose, value, standard, success. Our spouse wants us out of the home. Why else do we go to work? Any other reasons?
Pay the bills.
Pay the bills. Earn a living. How about earn a living? Earn a living. Jimmy, you notice which side of the ledger I put that on. I want some things that are going to go on the other side of the ledger.
God is honored by our work.
All right, I like that. Honors God. What else do we go to work?
To give back to God.
Wait, one at a time.
To give back to God.
To give back to God? I don't know. That's kind of neutral. It's a good thought. I like the thinking.
Give money.
I like your thinking, but kind of a neutral. Who else?
Moses over here.
Thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field, and the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread, till thou return into the ground. We gotta work because that's part of our sin problem.
Earn a living. Who else?
Well, that's not what he said, Larry. He said we got to work because we sinned and we're cursed.
Yeah.
And now we have to work because of it. That's what he said. It's not to earn a living.
Well, God gave us work.
Right.
So work was good. Work
If
didn't
we haven't
become,
sinned,
work
we
didn't
be
become
working.
bad after we sinned.
Exactly.
Work is good. It's inherently good. We might have to work hard for it and sweat, and we might be angry about it, but work itself is still good. I don't know about you guys, but I'd be totally bored if I were completely retired. Anybody but Steve. Anybody but Steve. No, but think about it, if you never had to work when you were 20 years old, at some point, trust me, you'd be bored. Who else? Nick, you got it?
God tells us to work. He commands us.
Ah,
He said no.
God
Wait, what?
commands
He
it.
said he would be converted. He said
What else?
I think God can use you in the workplace as a witness for Him.
I like it. I love it.
Even if you don't say words, sometimes you can be a silent witness by your actions and sometimes your lack of actions.
just like your rice field.
Yeah.
You know, the workplace is not the only place that we are to evangelize, but it's certainly one of the places that we have the opportunity to share Christ with others.
God says if you don't work, you don't eat. And those of us who would like to eat, we can do work.
All right, you're quoting Paul. But Paul would be contradicting himself, and he'd be contradicting Jesus if he truly believed that you had to work to eat. I think what Paul's saying in that verse, I think what Paul's saying in that verse is because God provides for us through work. If we don't work, if we don't take advantage of that opportunity, we should not eat. It's a little subtle difference there, but the understanding needs to be that we don't work to eat because God has promised us that He will feed us. We don't have to do something that God has already provided for us to do. But if, in this verse, if we're not doing what He's provided for us, I know that's subtle, Nick, but there's a difference. We don't want to be confused that we work to eat. No, God provides that. We talked about back in our part and His part. One of the things God does is He provides for us. He will provide for us. That's not the reason we're working.
I think a lot of us work to serve others. You think of nurses and firemen and policemen, they work to serve others. Yeah, they're doing it for themselves, but they've chosen their profession because it serves others.
I like that. I'm going to add one more that I thought of that's not on here, and I think work builds character. There might be some more, I don't know, but there's a big difference. This represents the worldly things and how as humans we think about work. But from a biblical perspective, from God's perspective, you know, first of all, He commands it. And if we do what He commands, we're honoring God. We're having an opportunity to evangelize, to spread the word, to spread the gospel, to serve others, and to build capital. Eric, Freudian slip from a financial advisor. You know, when we work, think about it, what we do and how we respond, whether you're an employer, Bob, how you respond to your employees, or if I'm your employee, how I respond to you. You know, what are we saying? If people know we're Christians and we're doing this or that, or we honoring God, or we walking the walk. So there's a real opportunity there, I think, in the workplace for us to honor God. You know, I have a few notes here on work. The average person spends 100,000 hours working, but often with the job comes some degree of dissatisfaction, boredom, lack of fulfillment, inadequate wages, countless pressures that we face. All this contributes to our discontentment, and this is regardless of your occupation. You know, I don't care if you're the owner of a company or the lowest employee in the company. Understanding spiritual principles that relate to work will help us find satisfaction in our job. God's perspective of work is, despite what many believe, work was initiated for our benefit in a sinless society. So remember, it's only after the fall that work became real labor, but work itself is still good. What is God's part in work? You know, God actually gives us job skills. We think about it as, well, we've developed this skill, or we've done it, what we've done. But God gives us those skills. If we go to Exodus 36:1, it reads that every skillful person in whom the Lord has put skill and understanding to know how to perform all the work shall perform. You know, you're certainly making the effort, but it's God that's given you that ability to have that skill. We all have different degrees of skill, but we can all relate it back to God. In God's economy, there is equal dignity in the labor of the automobile mechanic and the president of General Motors, in the labor of the pastor and the secretary serving the church. God gives us success. Do we give ourselves success by hard work, or does God give us success? What does the Bible say? Genesis 39, verses 2-3. The Lord was with Joseph, so he became a successful man. His master saw the Lord was with him, and how the Lord counseled all that he did to prosper. God controls promotion. Do we believe that? Let's see what the Bible says. Psalm 75, 6-7. For promotion and power come from nowhere on earth, but only from God. One of the major reasons people experience stress and frustration in their jobs is because they don't understand God's part in work. Consider this question for a few minutes. If God gives you your abilities and controls your success and promotion, how should this perspective affect your work? God's doing all of this for us.
You
How
still
should
have
it
free
affect us?
will though, Larry. You can still make bad choices in
Absolutely.
the workplace. So, yes, he gives it to you, but you have to do your part as well.
Right, throughout, we talked early on, God's part and our part. Remember, God's part in finances was his ownership, his control, and his provision. And our part was as a faithful steward. We still had to be faithful with what was given.
Larry, can I just
Sure.
share a personal story?
Absolutely.
When Jeff and I moved over here years ago, I couldn't quite understand. I had left a job in New Orleans. We knew we couldn't afford to live on this side of the lake unless both of us were working. So I thought, well, I'll just go over there and get a job. Well, over 40 years ago, there wasn't much over here. So, and I had 2 young children. So, I got a little flippant with God, and I just said, okay, you got us over here, you got us in this house, I don't have a job, what are you gonna do? I'm going out every day with a baby on my hip and a toddler and trying to find jobs, putting in applications and all of this. I was really, it was time. As most of you know, I was a teacher and I had gone to a number of principals. I went to the school board. I had experience teaching. I need a job, And now school was starting. And I had spoken with the principal and he didn't have any openings. I thought, I just don't have any openings. And I went home and I called out to God. And I said, it's in your hands. And that's where it should have been all along. I was doing my effort to find a job. And I put both the kids down for a nap. And I, went to the Lord in prayer. And it wasn't a few hours later, the principal called me. A teacher's husband had been transferred. And he said, if you want the job, it's yours. God supplied that. It was, you say, oh, it's my effort, my effort, my effort. I had done all the effort. I had touched base with all the people at the school board, and people, knocking on the principal's doors, as far as all the way into Slidell and Covington. I got a job a half a mile from my house, Mandeville Elementary. So God was behind all of that.
You did your part, you prayed and waited
But
on him to
he
do
provided. It wasn't anything really that I did. I had to realize, I had to give it up to him and say, God, it's in your hands. And that's where it was all along.
Good story.
One a scripture, when I hear stories like this and on the subject that we're talking about, a scripture that always comes to my mind is Proverbs 21:31. It says, "A horse is prepared for the day of battle, but victory comes from the Lord."
So he got all the praise and glory on that.
You know, part of this scripture, this study, as far as work goes, is understanding who do we work for. We don't work for the man. We don't work for people. We work for God. And when we can really begin to understand that, we can formulate why we're really there. And these are not bad things. God may give us these things. Okay? But that's not why that we work. That's not the attitude that we should take to the workplace. And I'm not talking like I'm somebody who did this, you know, I mean, you know, I was far from this. My very profession is against all of this. It's talking to people about all of these other things. You know, so I've had to come to grips with this more than anything. But once you come to grips with it, it's a real help and a real aid. You know, our part comes from Colossians 3, verses 23 to 24. Whatever you do, you work heartily, as for the Lord rather than man. It is the Lord Christ whom you serve. So we're told to work hard, but not to overwork. Keep your priorities in order. The employers have responsibilities too, to serve their employees, to be a good communicator. Bob is not. Pay your employees a fair wage and pay them promptly. And pray for godly employees. Steve, you have a business background, I know. Our responsibility as employees is honesty, faithfulness, prayerfulness, loyalty. All of these things verbalize faith. I think if we do our part, we're going to verbalize our faith. And that's what we want to happen in the marketplace. King Darius would have never known about God if Daniel had not communicated his faith at the appropriate moments while at work. You may remember that from John's teaching on Daniel. Daniel 6:20. The king spake and said to Daniel, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you have consistently served, been able to deliver you from the lions? Listen to the king's response from Daniel 6:26. I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel, for he is the living God and he endures forever. What an opportunity we have. Hopefully we never get thrown in the lion's den. But, you know, there's a real opportunity there in the workforce. Some other issues we talked about in the past was retirement. You know, there's not a whole lot biblical. There is something that I think Pastor Nick pointed out about the Levites. But we're in a society where we're so focused on that. You know, I think there's some valid reasons to want to retire, but I think there's some opportunities after retirement for all of us as well. Ambition, you know, Scripture doesn't condemn ambition. Paul was ambitious, but for the right reasons. The Bible is not the enemy of ambition, only the wrong type of ambition. Our ambition should be to please Christ, work hard and pursue excellence in our job to please Christ. What about our calling? You know, we all have a different call. Have you heard the expression, after God made you, he threw away the mold? What's true, there's no other person that's exactly like you. But the key is for each person to identify God's call for his or her life. Some of us are called to serve as ministers, while others are called for a secular life. Again, the key is for us to identify God's call for our life, recognize that God strategically places his children everywhere. A little bit about partnerships. If you get involved in a partnership, make sure the other person is also a Christian. Partnerships can be tough if anybody's experienced them, even with Christians. Procrastination. That's kind of one of the worst traits a lot of us have, is procrastination. Wives working outside of the home. You know, sometimes it's just necessary. You can't avoid it. Sometimes there's the spouse, and we're in a society where the spouse may be the breadwinner or the major breadwinner, the wife. So I think in terms of spouses rather than of wives. But I think the focus needs to be still in the home. Where's your priorities? I might be working, but outside of the home, but my focus is still the home. Some women are gifted as homemakers. There's no more important task, as far as I'm concerned, than being a homemaker and taking care of the children. But we respect wives that have the ability and want to pursue something. We respect our spouses that have to for financial reasons. But where's the focus? Eric?
I think, Larry, it depends on why. Why is it necessary? Is it necessary for both spouses to work because they need to in order to survive, or is it because they really want to have that vacation home or that retirement home in the top of the mountain in Colorado somewhere? You need to figure out what's ultimately the most important. If you're working because you want to raise your standard of living beyond what it really needs to be, then that's something you need to think about pretty hard before you move down that path.
And that's a good point. I remember one time, being the financial guy that I was when we talked about Linda working, when you put the math to it, of what you're going to pay for babysitters, what you're going to pay for maybe an extra coffee needed for gas, for clothing, for lunches, and what you're going to pay extra in taxes, is it really worth it? We came to the conclusion it wasn't worth it. But I think it's a decision that everybody has to make. I'm certainly not going to stand here and say, you should have to.
Larry, before you're saved, that is all a person has, is his wealth, his prestige. It's really sad, really.
Yeah.
Even before any of us were saved, that's your world. The home in Colorado, got to work for that. And what's it say? Life is just a vapor. It's just, when you're saved, you get a new perspective of everything. It's just amazing. Right?
Yeah, and it's not that God doesn't want us to have the condo in Colorado.
The perspective
it goes back to what Eric says about what we're doing and the reasons we're doing things. God's not against us having nice things.
Yeah.
Okay. But our priorities have to be straight, and we have to be doing things for the right reasons, and then maybe some of this stuff comes. But if it doesn't, we still have this. Anything else anybody wants to add on work before we move on?
I would just say that the hardest lesson for me to learn along the way when I was a lawyer was that I didn't, we think about in terms of I work and I get paid, I earned that paycheck by my work, and I always had that mentality of I earned that, and it was mine because I earned it, and I had to get back to the fact that it was really a gift. My paycheck, everything I had was a gift from him, including my ability to work and all that, and not to think of my paycheck as something that I earned, but to think about it as coming from God as a gift was really the thing that sort of helped me along the way.
A question I would ask is, how would we feel about Eric, and before that Nick, even Nick now, if he was working real hard and he felt like, you know, he could get raises and start making more money and doing well, and then go out and give speeches and talks and be able to get more because he's more of a respected person now. You know, we would somehow feel that as our pastor, your motives are wrong here. But why are we any different than our pastors? Aren't we all in ministry too? We're not at the same point, but that's part of our job. So if it doesn't make any sense for us to want a pastor that's going to be money hungry, we shouldn't be going to work to be money hungry either. What's the difference? You know, we're all in ministry.
So if I get a TV show, that's okay?
Yeah, she just can't
Well, we
ask
should
for offerings.
You make all your profits donated to the church. Have a good heart.
John?
One of the best illustrations to me in my life of the importance of work is there's a country in the Middle East called the United Arab Emirates. And in that country, when a male becomes 18 years of age, he is given by the government a $400,000 house. It's given to him. He's also given a yearly salary of $100,000. He didn't have to do anything. He doesn't have to leave his house. He doesn't have to go to work. He doesn't have to do anything. But because the government and the country is so rich, they reward their citizens that way, so their citizens keep them in power with no resistance. They give them a car. Okay, now there is a requirement that the man has to have 3 wives. He has to work his way up to 3 wives. Okay? But their oil industry was starting to fail, and we were asked to go in and find out why. Their men were completely incapable of working and making decisions.
That's true.
Because they never had to do anything. Everything had just been handed to them. They had never faced adversity. They had never had to make a decision in their life that would have bad consequences and work their way out of it. Everything was a free ride, and when they had to make decisions, they were oatmeal. They were completely incapable. So the human condition is such that it needs to have goals and objectives. And because I've seen it in the UAE, how that, you would think that would be heaven. You don't have to work, we give you a salary for nothing, we give you a home, pick out the Mercedes you want, it's all yours. It's not heaven. It isn't. It's really interesting to see how that has destroyed their young men. Totally destroyed them.
Good point.
Sounds like our universities today.
Okay, we're going to move on to some very practical stuff. I went through what I believe were the key points in Scripture. Now I want to spend a little time talking about some things that I think will help you practically to understand. I find that most people don't understand this stuff as much as they should, and I want to help them out. The first thing I want to talk to you about in the realms of insurance is property and casualty insurance, which you may think of as your automobile and homeowners insurance. As it relates to automobile insurance, can somebody tell me what these numbers mean?
It's a liability.
Be more specific.
10,000 for something, 20,000 for something, 10,000 for the, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a
Okay,
coverage you pick.
I get into a wreck with you,
Yes.
and I'm at fault, and I injure or kill your husband and 3 of your kids. If I've got this policy, how much is State Farm going to pay?
20,000.
per person. 10,000 per person?
How much overall?
20.
20,000.
Max, that's the max.
20,000 max. 10,000 per person. So if there were 2 people injured, they'd pay 20,000, 10,000 a person. If there's 3 people injured, they can't pay 10,000 a person because it exceeds the maximum. You were driving, what kind of car do you drive?
I have a BMW
A
convertible.
BMW convertible. I destroyed your BMW convertible How much will State Farm pay to replace your convertible?
10,000.
10,000.
That'll give her about 2 tires worth.
That'll give you about 2 times worth.
The total.
Okay.
Maybe.
A lot of people don't understand that. So when you see 50, 100, 50, we're up in the ante, 50,000 a person, 100,000 total, 50,000 for property damage. Incidentally, property damage also includes if I go through the living room of Jeff. We can repair your living room for 10,000. If I had this policy, 50,000. If I had this policy.
Is the property portion independent of the personal? In other words, so if 2 people are injured on your second one, and there's 25,000, let's say, of damage, let's say there's 2 deaths and 25,000 of damage, they would pay 150,000?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I've heard some people say you should get the lower coverage, because then that's all they can get out of you.
Okay.
So, but I don't
look,
know.
Get sued.
hang on. That's a very good point, and let's think about it. If you don't have any assets, in other words, if you have nothing that anybody can get at, you can get along with this. This is the minimum liability required by the state of Louisiana, although I would question you wanting to carry the minimum and not be responsible for what you might do to somebody else, but you understand the point. That's why if the kids today get insurance, you know, on their own, they're not part of the parents, they'll generally get the minimum because that's what is required. It used to be 5-10-5, it was just up to 10-20-10. The other thing that happens is if you have means, you probably carry a policy that may look something like this because you're trying to protect more. And you can add to your homeowner's insurance policy what's called a liability umbrella for $1 million. And basically what it says is if we run out of money here, we're going to go to this million. And it's surprisingly inexpensive. It might be like $120 a year to add $1 million of liability. But you first have to have at least this underlying coverage. They're not going to let you buy this and then add $1 million liability. So this kind of serves as your deductible, and then you move into this. So as you begin to acquire assets, you need to review this, okay? And sit down with an insurance agent and review it.
It would seem to me that if you have that big liability umbrella and you injure someone, their attorney will sniff that and then come after that, but they probably won't come after you if they have this money just sitting there for them to consume you after.
Well, let me tell you, if you got a $50,000 CD, Morris Bart is coming after it. Okay, so would you rather them come after your CD, or would you rather them come after your insurance company?
Can't they normally sue you no matter what? In other words, they take all your insurance money and then come out to your house?
Anybody can sue anybody for any reason. I can sue Steve right now because I don't like the way he's got his hands in his pocket.
Guilty.
Don't mean I win.
Because he looks
But
like
I
he
can
has a boat. Right, Steve? It looks like you have
That
a
means
boat.
you can.
Yeah.
Is
They want my vote.
there like a limit on what they can take away from you? Like, they can't leave you homeless and in the street, can they? Like, take your house and everything, or they,
Well,
certain things are,
There's
reasonable?
certain things that the government will protect. They'll protect your home. They may protect your vehicle because you got to get to work. They may protect your IRAs
Okay.
and qualified plans. But they're not going to protect your CDs or any other invested assets, your stocks and bonds, etc. Your second or third call. There's another important term when it comes to property casualty that people are a little unaware of, specifically how it works, and it's uninsured motorists. Most people believe that if somebody hits me and they don't have insurance, I'm covered because I've got uninsured motorists.
Already covered.
Yeah, well,
Collision.
the first thing to understand is that uninsured motorist is a bodily injury claim. So it has nothing to do with getting your car fixed. If I'm uninsured, Jimmy, and I hit you and wreck your car, your uninsured motorist is not going to fix your car. If you don't have collision to fix it yourself, then you're up the creek without a paddle. You can sue me if I have any money and try and get your car fixed. But you have no insurance to fix your car other than if you carry collision. See, if you don't carry collision, if you're just carrying liability, but if you have collision, you can file for it under your collision. You'd have to pay the deductible. They would fix your car, and then the insurance company would still sue me, and maybe you'd get your deductible back. But it's a bodily injury claim. It has nothing to do with anything else. So to that extent, uninsured motorist is a little bit of a duplication with your medical insurance.
Yep. So wait, but if I'm riding in your car and somebody hits you and they don't have insurance and I'm injured, I'm covered under your uninsured motorist.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, I was just going to say that
Okay,
I'm
go
not
ahead.
saying there's a reason not to have
Okay.
uninsured motorists. There are some reasons. I'm just saying most people mistake these. There's other reasons, but we can think about it as okay, I'm really devastated by this thing, and I would only sue you for pain and aggravation. And in effect, you can kind of sue yourself under your uninsured motorist and get something maybe that way. I'm only trying to share with you that it's not designed to fix your car. It's a bodily injury claim, and it's relative to that. Another thing to be aware of is medical payments. These are things insurance agents normally just throw on. We'll pay $3,000, $5,000 medical payments. That might be a good idea for a passenger, but a real life story is that I had a client insured with Blue Cross, and he was in an automobile accident and hurt badly in the hospital. The medical bills were building up, and Blue Cross wouldn't pay because the auto insurance was Aetna, and Aetna had these medical payments. And Aetna wasn't paying because that would prove they were at fault. And Blue Cross wasn't paying because medical payments on the car was the first liability. So in that scenario, if he had no medical payments, Blue Cross would have paid like that. But he had two insurances and nobody was paying. Go figure.
The hospitals do take the car insurance first,
Yes.
and to that limit, and of course, they're not quick at paying off.
So those are just a
What's
little,
left,
I'm
they'll
sorry.
put on your health insurance.
I'm sorry. That's a good point.
But we got a letter from Allstate, and they want us to state who's gonna be driving our cars. Anybody else have Allstate? And it's like, I just put it aside because I don't even know, I guess I have to call and find out. If somebody drives your car often, they wanna know who's driving.
Like your
it.
grandchild or something like that?
Yeah.
It's not even underage people.
Right.
It's,
Who's gonna be
well, yeah.
responsible?
Well, just like in business, we have to give them a list of our truck lots.
Oh.
And they have to investigate them, make sure there's been accidents, or if they've even had a drug test. They want to know who's driving your vehicle.
But when it comes to your car, it's not their business who drives your car, but you can give anybody permission to drive your car and you're covered. But if you tell them I have 14 grandkids, your rates are gonna go up to here, because they're just looking for a reason to jack it up. So you play the game and don't give them
Right.
any reason. to raise anything.
Yeah, I got a call saying my rates were going up, and I said, what do you mean my rates were going up? I've been driving for 30 years without an accident. They said, you're due.
Your numbers up, Mom.
Probability theory.
Larry, can your medical insurance, like that guy, Blue Cross, can they carve out and say, this is a result of an accident, so we're not gonna pay? Can they do that to you?
I don't know.
Because
First of all, yeah, first of all,
is it a result of an injury or an
they
accident?
can say that they're not the first liability,
Yeah, I
and
got
until the first liability is settled, they're not gonna pay. But whether they can carve that out or not, I don't know.
If you have any accident of any kind, you know, Blue Cross may make the bills initially, but they're gonna send a letter to the facility and to you and say, when you're in an accident, if you're in an accident, then whatever accident insurance has to pay.
Okay, I want to,
Larry,
go ahead.
before you leave that, I want to step out just a little bit. As a child of God, what should our response be to lawsuits?
Yeah.
As a,
To somebody suing us or
well,
somebody?
just in general, you see so much on TV, you know,
Yeah,
and you know there's a lot of fake lawsuits out there.
all right,
What-
I
what
believe
should our
that,
response be?
I believe that biblically, you know, we really shouldn't sue other people. But I also believe that there are some legitimate reasons why it might really be necessary. So I think there's a gray line between suing for the sake of suing versus suing because this is a real problem. You know, I'm out of work, I can't work because you hit me or whatever. Steve?
Yeah, I think what the scripture gives us a guideline on believers, and so we shouldn't be suing another believer. We take that to the church or to elders or something like that to try and get that resolved. But as far as a business transaction of one corporation to another, I don't know if we have any guidelines on that at all. I don't know of anything. But then you get into issues, I think we start then getting into issues of personal, if somebody hits us from behind, you know, and you grab your neck and want to go sue them because you can get some money out of them, I think that's fraudulent, and I think we have clear
Yeah.
indicators not to do that.
Yeah, some people sue for the sake of suing. Okay, I want to spend a little time on life insurance. I think there's a big misunderstanding of life insurance and how it works. And as an advisor, I've always considered myself someone that needs to educate my clients, not tell them what to do, basically give them options and help them understanding. Now, some clients would rather you just tell me what I need. But I want to make an effort to go ahead and tell you a little bit about it. The other thing is that I think a lot of people become insurance poor. And you become insurance poor by over-insuring a lot of things. One of the things I hate to see as a financial advisor is these workplace policies, AFLAC and whatever, and there may be somebody in here that disagrees with me, but I think one of the problems is that something sounds good and the employees start signing up for it and they can become insurance poor very quickly. For example, I don't need a policy that pays me extra if I get cancer because I have a Blue Cross policy that's going to pay me if I have cancer. It's almost like if I'm going to buy a $500 deductible to save premiums on my car insurance, but some company comes around my workplace and wants to sell me a $500 policy that pays my deductible if I get into an accident. You start buying insurance on insurance. Well, it's going to pay me so many days in the hospital if I'm sick or if I'm out of work. Or if you have a good medical policy, a good disability policy, you don't need all these extra things, and that just makes you become insurance poor versus focusing on the major things. So that's just my little political announcement there. There's nothing biblical about that. I wanted you to understand, I took an example of a male age 45 preferred non-tobacco user in a $500,000 life insurance policy. And insurance companies will issue standard, or they'll issue preferred, or they'll issue a rating if you have a problem where they might charge you extra. But I'm showing preferred here. Females run cheaper than males because you live longer, so the premiums are a little cheaper. But this is a male. And I believe in insurance for the sake of insurance. I'm not going to talk about any insurance that creates a cash value for retirement. We can discuss that under investments. But I'm just looking at pure insurance. And if that person buys, a 45-year-old buys a 10-year term policy for $500,000 and is a preferred non-smoker, his premium is going to be $32 a month. If he buys a 15-year term policy, 42 and so forth, 20, 52, 25, and 30, 89. And if he wants insurance for the rest of his life until he dies, or until he hits age 120, it's $349 a month. Wow. Now, the question becomes, how long should I buy the insurance for? Clients ask me that all the time. I say, I don't know, Bob, when you're going to die. I'll tell you how long you should have it for.
I don't feel so good.
Well, maybe a 10-year will be fine. So, you know, we don't know. I think you have to figure it out. I think for a 45-year-old to say, well, a 20-year will get me to age 65, you know, I would encourage you to think about that. You know, I'm 70, and I don't want to give up my insurance. I have $3 million of life insurance, and I don't want to give up any of it. And it doesn't matter to me whether I need it or not. You have to decide when I no longer want insurance. I've never had it. I've been in this business 35 years plus. I've never had a 65-year-old come to me and say, Larry, I don't want my insurance anymore. I want to turn it in. Heck, we're seeing 65-year-olds buy houses with mortgages. New houses. It's happening. You know, some of us are fortunate. We're in a position where we're debt-free, which is great. And we feel like we have enough of assets in the bank that we don't need it, and that's fine. But I think each person has to determine what they would need. Let me tell you what the biggest problem is I see is a 45-year-old buying a 10-year term policy and then trying to renew it at age 55. Yeah. Man, let me tell you, at the end of this term premium, the rates are astronomical. In other words, this $32 a month premium might go up to $200 a month when you hit year 11. So whatever term you're doing, you want to make sure it's a term that I'm comfortable with, that I'm not going to need it after that period. And I think a lot of people don't know. I think a lot of people bought 20-year term policies 15 years ago and they got 5 years left and they're not thinking about it. And boy, I would just encourage you to pull out those policies and see how long you have left. Because if you want to, let's say you got 5 years left and you want it for another 10 years, then it's a really good time to maybe consider renewing it now while you're healthy enough to shop for competitive rates and extend it for another year.
I'll give you an example on a 20-year policy. I just had a term policy expire, its term, and we were paying about $40 a month. To get the same exact coverage going forward was over $2,500. From $40 to $2,500.
Yeah.
They don't want to insure you.
No.
You're higher risk.
No.
Yeah.
Instead of starting on a 10-year policy according to your chart, why not at the get-go buy a 30-year or 40 years so that you have that smaller payment for the full 40 years and not worry?
Well, I agree, but you still got people out there that's looking at it, and get it for 32 a month, why do I want to pay 89? I'll cross that bridge when I get there. But from a sensible standpoint, yes, a 30-year term policy would make a lot of sense. Now, as you get older, you know, if I were to run this on a 55-year-old, a 30-year term policy wouldn't be available. In other words, the 45 is probably the last age you could get a 30-year policy. After that, they'll sell you less. The last one that I want to look at, I'm referring to whole life, not because it builds cash value. It does, this last policy does build cash value, but it's insignificant. And I tell my clients to ignore the cash value. The main purpose of this policy is that your premium will never go up. It's guaranteed for life. And if you have this policy, you will always have coverage. If you live to 100 years old, you're going to have the coverage. And we realize you don't need it, but it'll be a great inheritance for your children. And inheritances are biblical. We can go look at verses where it tells us that inheritances are biblical. So even if you don't need it, it's something that becomes a great asset. It's the most efficient asset to pass on. You know, you pass on your IRA, if you don't spend it all, your qualified plans, it's very inefficient. The ideal person, you know, if he wants to leave his children $1 million, he has a $1 million life insurance policy, and then he has $1 million of assets, and he spends it down to the last penny before he dies. The government gets nothing. And the life insurance goes tax-free to the kids and everybody's happy. So there are a lot of things that you can do. You know, as an advisor, I would much rather have somebody come to me with this whole life contract than with the other contract. Because there's just, you know, what you always want to do, and I know this is not going to apply to most of you, but there's power in having something that you may not feel you need at this particular point. We've had clients with $1 million of property that has come to me and wanted to sell the property to create income for him and his wife. Because at this point he was tired of doing all the headaches of the property, and he just wanted to turn it into income. Well, after taxes, he was going to net about $800,000. And I'm going to use easy math numbers. You can't get 10% today. But it would have provided $80,000 a year income for him and his wife for the rest of their life. And then when they died, the children get $800,000. Unless he chose to share some of that with Manderville Bible Church. That was his plan. You look like you have a question. Yeah? Well, here's what we did. We said, my plan is for you to give it away. Let's give it, one Manderville Bible Church, but let's give it away. Let's give it to the church or whoever. How does that help?
Tax deductible.
What?
It's not a tax deduction?
It is tax deductible. But we didn't want to give it to them during their lifetime. We said, let's give it to them after you and your wife die, and let's them provide the income. So assuming they use the same investment vehicle that earned 10%, he and his wife got $100,000 a year for the rest of their life. Better than $80,000, right? What about the children? That's their problem, right? Well, somebody mentioned the tax deduction. We got a $500,000 tax deduction. It wasn't $1 million because the charity or the church didn't get the money. until after they both die. In a 50% tax bracket, they would save $250,000, which we use part of it to buy a single premium $1 million life insurance policy, naming the kids as beneficiary. So let's summarize. By giving the money away, they have $100,000 a year to spend instead of $80,000 a year. The children get $1 million tax-free instead of $800,000 taxable. And Mandeville Bible Church gets $1 million if they were getting nothing here. Now, if they had a 20-year term policy that they didn't have anymore, and they're uninsurable, the plan don't work. Because we have to cut the children out. But if they have a permanent policy that we can just change around a little bit, or if they're insurable and we could buy them, then the plan works. All I'm trying to communicate here to you is that there's a lot of reasons why you're not thinking about right now that this could be a valuable asset to you somewhere down the road. So, you can certainly buy a policy that fits your needs, and I would question that you rethink, you know, if you're only planning, if you're 45 and you're planning to 65, say, am I really not going to want it at 65? Maybe I want that 30 year. Or if I can afford it, do I really want a long-term policy, something that I'll have for the rest of my life? The worst case scenario is I never do anything like this, but I can pass on some amount of money tax-free. And I need to wrap up, but I wanted to quickly tell you that the other type of policies are whole life, universal life, and variable life. And all of these contracts represent permanent policies that have the benefit of being that premium guaranteed for life, but it requires putting more money into it. And when you're going to put more money into something, you have to look at, is that a good investment? Would I be better off putting more money into stocks and bonds or real estate or something else? I'm a big believer in the Roth IRA, which we can talk about when we get to investments. Variable life just means instead of traditional interest rates that an insurance company might pay me, I'm betting on the stocks and bonds. In other words, I'm investing my cash value in stocks and bonds. So you can take permanent insurance and invest in interest rates of stocks and bonds. But one thing I always look for is the death benefit guaranteed for my life. Because I'm telling you, there's a lot of agents that sold these policies, universal life policies, in the early 80s when interest rates were 16%. And they calculated their premium based on making 16% forever. And today they're making 2% and the policies are crashing after all these years. So you have to be careful about those policies. If you have any of those old universal life policies, pull them out, review them. Go to your insurance agent and have him review them. See if they need to be changed or updated. Again, we'll finish up on insurance next week. We'll talk a little bit about investments. We'll kind of have a summary and wrap it up. Any more questions before we close? Yeah.
I just had a quick comment going back to the lawsuit stuff. 1 Corinthians 6, like 1 through 9 or so, talks about lawsuits between believers. So if anybody wanted a scripture reference for lawsuits between believers, 1 Corinthians 6, like 1 through 8 or 9 or something.